Welcome, everybody. Welcome to XpoNorth, day 2 of our conference. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm absolutely delighted with the panel that we've got with us today, who I'm going to introduce to you shortly. First of all, I'd like to let people know who are new to XpoNorth a little bit about who we are and what we do. So we offer year-round support to the creative sector in the Highlands and Islands region. This includes the creative disciplines of writing, publishing, screen and broadcast, heritage, digital technology and music, fashion, craft and textiles. So a really broad array of areas that we cover. So really few words can describe the impact this year has had on the retail sector, with many high street stores gone and others struggling to survive. As always, will be those who will have adapted and found new opportunities. And undoubtedly the retail landscape has changed, which we're all very much aware of. And this is why we wanted to gather together this panel of experts today to talk about the future of retail. So we're going to ask a series of questions of each of the individuals, but first, and we would like you to get involved in this conversation by adding some questions into the question box, which we'll look to ask towards the end of the questions that we have lined up. But first of all, I'd love to introduce the panel that we have. So to begin with, we have Andrew Jennings, who has recently been awarded an OBE for his services to international trade, fashion and retail. So welcome, Andrew. And congratulations on your recent award. That's fantastic and well deserved for the work that you've done. I'm just going to give you a quick resume of some of the companies that you've worked with, which includes Harrods. You've been leading roles in Harrods, House of Fraser, Brown Thomas in Ireland, Saks Fifth Avenue in the US, Woolworths in South Africa, Holt Renfrew in Canada. So you really do have a fantastic international perspective on retail spread across 45 years or so. We've also got Nicole Vanderbilt, welcome as well, who has, through her career, championed creative individuals and businesses through her role as VP International at Etsy, and now more recently bookshop.org. So really a great voice for small businesses and the creative industry over the last 25 years. We've also got Kate Hills here of Make It British. Kate has for the last 10 years been the voice of British manufacturing and has seen firsthand the design potential within the UK, connecting customers and retailers with makers and galvanised interest in UK manufacturing. So welcome, Kate. And last but not least, George McNeil, Managing Director of Retail of Johnsons of Elgin. George is part of the senior team overseeing the transformation of Johnsons of Elgin from Scottish manufacturer to global retail brand. Now with stores across Scotland, London and the US, and with a growing online presence, George has experienced firsthand the international growth potential for a company whose roots are firmly based in Scotland. So welcome, George, as well. Great. Now I would like to start with a number of questions, so we'll get straight into it. So we'll start with Nicole. So Nicole, from your background of being passionate about supporting the smaller makers and moving from Etsy to the bookshop experience, could you tell us what you're doing with bookshop.org and how that works?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me today. So the way bookshop.org works is our mission is to financially support independent bookshops. And what happens is an independent bookshop comes to our site, and with about the same amount of time and skill it takes to set up a Twitter or Instagram profile, they can set up a shop front on bookshop.org. And then anytime they sell a book through our website, they get a 30% commission on the cover price of that book. Now, what we do with that order when we receive the order from the customer is we actually pass it directly to our wholesale partner, and that book gets taken off their shelves in the warehouse, put in some recycled cardboard and sent directly to a customer's home. So the idea is that these independent bookshops have a free, low hassle, low tech skills involved way of getting a share of the growing online book market. And the company was started just before the pandemic, but I think, what we're really focused on is this intersection between where people are buying more and more and more online. We've all been forced to do that in some ways over the last little while, but it was happening well before the pandemic. And then people also realizing that their high street and their communities really matter. And so by being able to provide customers a platform where they can buy online and get the convenience of that, but still be supporting the really important businesses and spaces in their community, we're finding that that's resonating.
Brilliant. So effectively, this is supporting the bookshops across the country, and creating one big platform, which of course we can't but mention the Amazon word. So it's great to see that support's in place. Good, thank you. And Kate, if we could move on to you next. Kate, you're recognised as the voice of UK manufacture. And you've been on quite a journey championing British manufacturing. Can you tell us a bit about how Make It British works and how it has benefited both the manufacturers and the retailers within the UK?
Thank you, Joan, and thank you for having me here today. So my background is in buying, and the reason I set up Make It British is I became frustrated with how much product in the latter part of my career we were sourcing from overseas, the lead times involved in that and the hassle and all the long-term trips. So I wanted to support the manufacturing that was left in the UK. And at the time when I set up Make It British 10 years ago, it was actually really difficult to find out where all of the existing manufacturers were. And surprisingly, there was still so many of them left, all sort of surviving. And my plan was to connect both retail and smaller companies, SMEs mainly, with the manufacturers that were left here in the UK so that they could make their products here. So at Make It British, we have run a trade show in the past for 7 years, which represented all the UK textile manufacturers. We had both small and large businesses coming to that to find manufacturers in the UK. We also have a membership, which is growing rapidly now, particularly since the pandemic, of those SMEs that do make here in the UK that need extra support and help to raise the profile of their brand. So it really is about raising the profile of those companies that make in the UK, both on the B2B side and the B2B side, B2B and B2C.
Excellent. And certainly, I'm sure there's a lot more interest in UK manufacturing, particularly with the struggles of importing, but also the value add of that too.
Hugely.
Yeah. So moving on to George for Johnston's Velgen, a beacon for Scottish textiles, which is a wonderful company. Obviously, you've been around for a long time, established as a manufacturer, but also growing your brand presence as well. So can you give us a sort of overview of how you've made the transition, especially more recently from a manufacturer to a global brand?
Yeah, lovely. Good morning, Joan. Good morning, all. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's lovely to hear Kate talking about Make It Britain and Make It British. It's music to our ears, to be fair. Yes, Johnston's next year turns 225 years old, and it's fair to say that Johnston's is primarily a manufacturer. That's who we are, and that's what we've done. Now, what happened probably 20, 25 years ago is we had a number of customers and partners who were looking to bring Scottish manufactured products into their environment, but didn't necessarily have a strong brand. So at that point, we opted to put our label onto the product. So by default, 25 years ago, we become what's known as a manufacturer label, as opposed to a brand. And we recognised that that label started to grow and started to get some footprints in some significantly luxury end markets, as well as some of the entry-level markets. Whereas, you know, when you start to review that kind of promiscuous approach, when you're happy to work with a number of people, you have to reflect on your own behaviour of what the outcome of that is. Now, the outcome for us at that point was that we would be in 2 for 50 quid cashmere shops on Regent Street, but at the same time would have the beauty of being in some of the high-end luxury stores with our manufacturing label. So we had to reflect on that and take stock of, is that right for our name, our brand, to be in such a wide array of places? And the answer we came to was no. And about 7 or 8 years ago, we went on a journey as a new chief executive came into the business to say, it's now time to start to behave like a brand. We want to work like a brand, behave like a brand. So that's where the opportunity of growth would be for actually manufacturing our own product and growing that brand. So that took a lot of self-reflection and a lot of brave decisions to say, okay, where do we want to be in the market as a brand? And what does that mean to this approach that we've had in the past? And who are the accounts that maybe we have to say goodbye to, or develop a secondary Scottish manufactured label for those accounts so that the Johnston Velgen brand were no longer associated with a level in the market which we didn't feel we wanted to sit in. So on reflection of that, we made some decisions to clean up the location in which you would find the brand so it was more luxury. At the same time, you then ask yourself, so what does the retail footprint look like, and how do you get your brand to that international audience? And that's where decisions were made, such as cleaning up and refreshing the website so it had more of a feel about it, more of a premium feel. Looking at the fact that where would we represent ourselves as a brand? We looked at Bond Street, New Bond Street, and we found Utopia on New Bond Street to find a lovely site in New Bond Street, as well as in the home in Scotland and the capital in Maltese Walk in Edinburgh. So that primarily was the area we had to look at. We had to look at ourselves, Joan, and actually ask ourselves, were we happy where we were happy with our behaviour? Did we articulate a brand? Did we speak like a brand? Did we act like a brand? There's been a number of other things we've done on that journey, reflecting on bringing a new marketing director into the business, bringing a creative director into the business, that all benefited the evolution of the brand to where we are now. And I think when we go on further, we'll talk a little bit about there's still reflection going on. We are far from fait accompli, and it certainly is a journey of moving from that manufacturing label into a brand and how you behave like a brand. Excellent, thank you. We all look and follow Johnson's Velgen with interest as you grow, as you continue to grow. So Andrew, I'd like to come to you next. And first of all, one of the things I would like to just mention is Andrew has actually written a book on retail, Almost Is Not Good Enough. And a little plug for Andrew on this, because it's actually the sales of this go to the Prince's Trust. But absolutely fantastic book, really common sense, really good read for anyone in the retail sector. So actually, Andrew, I hope you don't mind me doing that. So thank you.
I appreciate you doing it. Thank you.
So Andrew, with your vast experience in the global retail market, obviously there's a lot of change happening. How do you feel that retailers stay relevant in this fast changing world, and ever more so now with what's happened this last 18 months?
Great question, Joan. But firstly, great to be with you and on this panel with Nicole, Kate and George. I appreciate being invited here. You know, relevance is a small word, but it's got huge implications. And there are 4 criteria in my book, and it's actually in my book, that speaks about how retailers need to stay relevant. Number 1, it's all about the customer. Understanding their wants, needs, and desires. The customer is changing so fast today. And we have to keep, and the customer is no longer the king. I call them the super being, because they know everything about product at the touch of a button. Secondly, we've got to constantly innovate to stay relevant, and innovate with excellence, using technology wherever possible. Thirdly, it's about people, hiring talented people who are passionate about what they do. My definition of passion is the human soul on fire, because if you've got passionate people, then they're going to go that extra mile. My 4th point is ensuring that the product is in line with the market trends that the customer is looking for, because you can only stay relevant if your product is relevant with the customer's needs. And in my book, I asked 35 CEOs, how do you stay relevant? And many of the points that I've mentioned are covered by international CEOs. That's a quick summary of how to stay relevant today.
Thank you. That's great. Lots to take on board there. Nicole, coming back to you, what do you think the mix of online and offline shopping will look like in the future? Obviously, there's been a growing interest in online sales. We've all seen that over the last year, particularly. So how do you think that's going to balance out?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And, you know, like I said at the beginning, I think everybody's been really focused on what's happened during lockdowns and the pandemic, and rightly so, because a lot of change has happened. But I think it's important to keep in mind that it's really accelerated a pace of change that we were seeing before all of this started, where, you know, as Andrew says, everyone has a phone at their fingertips now that they can research and buy from. And so I think in some ways the bar is getting really high on an in-person experience. You have to sort of beat the convenience and ease of being able to sit on your sofa at night and just order something up. But the thing that's sort of in tension with that is a real desire to support our local communities. You know, you've seen this throughout the pandemic, where it's like, whether it's a GoFundMe page for your local theater, or, you know, a real desire to support your local greengrocer or corner store rather than the bigger supermarkets. And so I think what we're going to head towards is a very, a very people-oriented environment in the real world, where the benefit of going into a high street shop is going to be being able to interact with people, being able to get the kind of expertise that's hard to get from technology alone. You know, in our case, Amazon has for over 20 years now, with incredible amount of resources, been working on algorithms to recommend books. And they do a reasonable job of it, but it is nothing like talking to a person that has actually read and emotionally responded to the book that they're recommending to you. And so I think if you know exactly already what you want and you're very price sensitive about a product, you will probably continue to buy that online. But if you enjoy the process of shopping and/or benefit from that kind of expertise like you get from an independent bookseller, I think you'll continue to see people really go into stores for that kind of experience.
Yeah, certainly the experience of going into a bookshop, speaking to, you're looking for recommendations, you've got a human contact, and this goes back to, you know, what Andrew said too, that understanding the customer and being able to deliver back what they need is going to be even more important, and that whole experience of being within the bookshop and what it offers is going to be essential going forward. Great, thank you. Kate, so we've been through obviously a terrible time this last 18 months, both with the impact of the pandemic and obviously Brexit. We can't forget about it. What are you hearing are the key concerns now for UK brands and retailers going forward?
Can I just go back on the point actually that Andrew and Nicole made before I answer that question, Joan, just to say both of those points about giving the customers what they want when they want it and supporting local all plays into UK manufacturing, because if you've got a manufacturer that's local, you can buy product from them very quickly. So you've got a much shorter lead time. And the feedback we're hearing from all the brands and companies that we work with is the fact that they love having local manufacturers that they can actually go and see and have conversations with eye to eye and face to face. It makes a real difference. But as far as the challenges are concerned, I think the biggest one, aside from obviously, you know, the tariffs that are now being introduced and the added cost of raw materials now, bringing in raw materials, which, you know, can't be denied, because it's very difficult to make a product in the UK and have a totally 100% from start to finish supply chain. I mean, you know, Johnson's, for instance, cashmere doesn't come from the UK. So there's obviously challenges there with raw materials, but the surprising one that's come out of everything and Brexit is the confusion over the labelling now, and the fact that they've changed the rules and you now have to have a product, each individual product has to fit certain criteria to say whether it can be labelled as made in the UK or made in Scotland or made in England. And that might not sound like a problem, but it is twofold, because firstly, depending on the labelling, people can get around paying duty. So it leaves it open for people to take advantage, or businesses to take advantage that don't actually make here. So we've been contacted at Make It British by a lot of companies that saying, oh, now the rules have changed and it's now a double transformation. Does just printing this garment and sewing a label in that says made in the UK count as made in the UK, even though the t-shirt's coming from Cambodia or Bangladesh? So that, of course, impacts on the genuine businesses that do make in the UK, because, of course, labour's more expensive. And so it is, you know, we're selling a premium product here that's made in the UK. And if people can bring in imports and label them wrongly, it impacts on those that are genuinely making here. So that's been the biggest challenge that we're hearing back from all the brands that we're working with that make here.
Yes, an awful lot still to be sorted out there, and a lot of heartache for many small businesses who maybe don't have the resource to be able to understand all the technical issues and the legal aspects of it too. So there's much more work to be done. I know UKFT are working very hard on that. So yeah, that's a continuing issue. George, moving back to you. So Johnston's of Elgin have seen incredible growth over the last number of years, which is fantastic. Could you share with us the strategy of the balance around the physical stores and the growth on the online as well?
Yeah, of course. It's very interesting at the moment. If you take where we are in today's kind of place, you know, if we've got a store in New Bond Street, and to be perfectly honest, it's a bit of a ghost town there at the moment. So I think, you know, to commit to retail growth and bricks and mortar is very brave, especially in the landscape that we have at the moment. That doesn't mean there's not opportunities in the market. I just think the way in which they're going to be approached will change. Now, one of the beauties of growing a brand, or one of the challenges, one of the beauties, one of the opportunities is as you grow a brand and you take risk and you maybe buy into or develop new ranges and new categories, with that comes the lesser sell-through of that product through a time, because you're trying to educate a customer on who you are and what you're doing differently. With that comes the opportunity of inventory. And through a pandemic where sales have been tough and you've got full season product in, be it spring, summer, be it autumn, winter, a lot of that builds a lot of inventory. That's gave us the opportunity to start to look at how we clear that product and educate consumers on who we are and what we do. So through a bricks and mortar opportunity, we're now looking at building a store, or we're in the process of refitting a store in Kildare Village in Ireland, just outside Dublin, which is the sister village to Bicester Village in Oxford, part of the value retail chain. It's very much of the luxury end, if you like, or the premium end of the kind of outlet malls. So we're looking at retail growth in that space, as well as other two opportunities. Now, the one or two other opportunities is where, when the landscape is tough, you have a great opportunity, which is within pop-up stores, because that allows you to test different locations, allows you to test customer profile, allows you to test your brand in other areas. And at the moment, you'll see that I think tenants are becoming key over landlords, and landlords, I think, will be open to significant opportunities to deal in that space. So that's one area that we're looking at with seriousness. The other one, we look at the online presence, is that we've been doing online now for the best part of about, say, 12, 13 years. And one of the things I would always advise people as they start to open up online is never underestimate the value of getting to understand that customer. And the panelists have said it today, Nicole said it, Kate said it, Andrew said it, is the beauty of online is consumers are willing to tell you about themselves. The ones who are willing to share GDPR ruling and so on, and do it all properly, but you learn and be educated by that. That then means as you build up that data and knowledge of the consumer, when you start to increase your spend for customer acquisition, you start to understand what the lifetime value of a customer is, so that you know how much you're willing to spend in order to attract new customers to your website, attract new customers to your brand, because you can start to estimate and forecast what that consumer behaviour is going to be like and what their spend may well be in the future. Now, this number may have changed, but it's just a small statistic to support that. But if you as a family of four walk into Tesco, if Tesco keep you as a long-time value customer for a lifetime, it's £250,000 customer. And that's the way the supermarkets will look at consumers when they walk in. The minute you walk in the door, if we keep that family, that's £250,000 for that period of lifetime on average. So if you take a similar approach, that if you get to know the consumers when they come to the website, get to know their data, and then start to attract those customers that they through whether a PPC or organic growth, however you do it online, the more you can educate yourself, the higher your spend you can give when you know the return you're getting. So that's a very quick synopsis, I think, Joan, of the two areas we're looking at when it comes to bricks and mortar, where our opportunity lies, and then how we've been looking at our e-commerce. The one thing I would say is that we're doing a lot of reflection on that data collection because we didn't do it properly at the start. And that's where I'd advise people to really try and do it properly at the start, because the amount of retrospective work we're now having to do to get it right, and we're spending money and getting it wrong. So there's a lot of learnings on that journey as well. That's yeah, it brings a bit of pain, but we're getting to a better place with it. So the more you can do at the start, the better.
Yes, absolutely. I can agree with that. Having launched my own online business with Ava Innes a year ago, and learning by some of the mistakes that you do and growing, and the internet is, for anyone who's watching who is considering launching an online business, it is complicated. It is very complicated, and you need the right people on board to help with that too. But thank you, George, that's great. So Andrew, on to you next. How do you retain a retail brand consistency across multiple markets? Obviously, you've had experience in an international space. So how do you retain the brand consistency?
Look, I'm sure that both George and Kate have gone through exactly this issue. And now I've worked in 6 countries around the world and have imported British brands into Germany, the US, Canada, Australia, and a couple of other countries. And the important thing, number one to me, is you've got to retain the point of view of that brand. It needs to be fully understood, and there needs to be on a consistent basis. And what do I mean by point of view? What's the personality of that brand? And that whether if it's a British brand, it's understood in that marketplace. The brand must look and feel as it would do and was originally designed to look. It must never be diluted. There must be a brand Bible, and the staff and the management in those countries need to fully understand. I'll give you an example. When I was in Germany, we brought in a brand, Phase 8, out of the UK, mostly special occasion dresses. And I brought it into Germany, but we did a big job in making sure that the point of view of the brand was maintained in the German stores, the look, the feel, and we sent the German team to England for a week to understand exactly the culture of the brand, because it's the culture that's going to ensure that the brand stays consistent. So as a totality, make sure that that point of view is consistent, and it will only be successful if it relates in that marketplace.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew. So Nicole, back to yourself. How can small businesses compete with so much shopping moving online? Obviously, we've seen the growth of that, and particularly with the experience that you had at Etsy as well, where you've seen represented lots of small makers. What's your view on that?
I mean, yeah, it's such a great question. And I obviously come to it from a slightly biased place, having worked at these two platforms. But I would say that there are, if I think about the difference between when I started at Etsy and now, just the number of tools and platforms available to small business to get going online is really, grown incredibly, whether it be using MailChimp to have an email newsletter, or using social media to engage really regularly and sort of informally, as a lot of small businesses are great at doing and need to do because of resource. I think in the bookshop sector, what we've seen is that people have sort of gotten over a fear that they had before the pandemic. A lot of bookshops thought to themselves, oh, what I'm really good at is that in-store experience and running events and having things that are unique to a physical space. And in working with our almost 500 bookshops, we realized that it is fairly easy to translate a lot of that stuff to these online channels. So to build on what Andrew was just saying, I think you could sort of take the same principle, not cross-border, but cross-media, right? So if you have a really strong point of view in your bookshop and you major on a genre, or you're really great at literary fiction, or whatever your specialty is, being able to take that with you onto whether it be a Shopify website or a platform like Etsy or bookshop.org or social media or MailChimp, there are tools out there that will allow you to bring that and keep that engagement going online. And I think the thing that people have come to realize that was true before the pandemic, but it has been writ large of late, is that there isn't an online shopper and an offline shopper. That maybe in the early days of the internet that was true, but really almost every customer these days is a multi-channel customer. And so small businesses need to figure out which of those tools will help them sort of step into the rest of that relationship with their customer. People will go into a store when they can and when they enjoy it, and when they need to, they will buy online. And so how do you become that port of call for them online, I think is the question.
Yes, great, thank you. And actually on that, talking about makers, particularly focusing back within obviously our own region and across the UK, Kate, have you seen a marked difference in the customers appreciating UK-made products? And if so, can you share some examples of that?
Definitely, without a doubt. I mean, in the last 10 years since I've been running Make It British, when I first started it, everyone thought I was bonkers, like no one makes anything in the UK anymore. And so, this year we ran the first ever Made in UK Day to celebrate 10 years of Make It British. And we had something like 14 million people sharing and using that hashtag, both consumer side and business side. There's several reasons I think people now want to buy products that are made in the UK. Firstly is, like with bookshop.org, people like supporting local businesses. Sadly, it is also a kind of anti-China kickback, really, because of COVID, which is not what we're about at Make It British at all, but it has had an impact on the fact that people are suddenly waking up to the fact that everything is made on the other side of the world, and there's some great things made here. And then also because people have had more time during lockdown to actually spend online, which is where most of the businesses are that make in the UK. That's where their strength is, rather than on the high street, which still 99% of stuff you buy on the high street is made overseas. So they've shopped online. They've discovered more of these brands that are making in the UK because they've had time to read their story. They've seen them on social media, telling all about the provenance of their products, the people that are making them. And that's had a real impact. People started realizing, oh, okay, if I buy this product, I actually know who's made it. And I know Johnston's have done that a lot, haven't they, George? You know, showing much more about the factory and the background of, you know, everything that goes into making that product, and the skill and the craftsmanship as well that goes into making that product, rather than in a faceless factory that's overseas.
Great. And actually on that, the manufacturer, we have Patrick Grant. Sorry, can you hear?
Joan, could I just build on something that Kate has just said, please? When I was in Germany, we ran a great British event called Feel London. And exactly what Kate is saying about the craftsmanship, and German people just loved this because, you know, what is the quality and why were they interested? Because it was differentiated, it was craftsmanship, and people found new brands. And I was just amazed at the number of brands that we were able to represent. So, you know, what you're doing, Kate, I think is terrific. And the export opportunity for British brands is big.
Huge.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Joan.
Not at all, thank you. And I think on that, you know, obviously we're based here, XpoNorth's based here in the Highland Island region. We have a lot of makers, both small and large, and it is about that global reach now and telling your story. It is about the provenance. It's about how you connect with that customer, but they want to know where you live. We can see that, you know, we live in the most amazing surroundings in the Highlands and Islands, and a lot of our makers have got right on their doorstep that access to wonderful content which their customers engage with. So really important. Later this afternoon at 2 o'clock, we've got Patrick Grant talking, who's always been passionate about UK manufacture, very much involved in manufacturing himself and recognising that skill base. So anybody interested in this, please do join us at 2 for that. Okay, so moving back on to Andrew, actually, one of the things that has come up more recently around sustainability is also about the sharing economy and rental to prolong the life of products. Do you think this is a long-term trend or is this something relatively short-term?
Look, I think there's no question, Joan, this is long-term. According to global data, UK rental market is going to reach 2.3 billion by 2023. And Grazia magazine have said the biggest trend in 2021 will be rented fashion. Now, rented fashion is not new at all. If I think of Moss Bros, they've been going for many years for hiring for special occasions, wedding outfits, evening dresses, coats, and all of that sort of thing. But in the last few years, we've seen the success of Rent the Runway. There's a great British innovation, Her Collection, that's just set up a pop-up shop in Selfridges. And I was having a look at it the weekend. I think it's looking terrific. So instead of spending £600 or £700 on a dress or an evening dress, you can rent it for £60. for 5 days, I think it is. Then you've got even borrow my doggy. If you don't want to have a dog yourself, then you can rent a dog, and then rented furniture. So I think that sustainability is absolutely key today with consumers, especially millennials. And I think this whole rental opportunity is going to expand. Fashion, homewares, you name it. Big opportunity.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with that. And I've been driving sustainable product for the last 5 years in the work that I've been doing, and can see that, you know, we need to make better use of the resources. We need to give product longer life, sharing, passing on. All of that is going to be so important to the future. George, can I jump back to you? Obviously, Johnsons have recently been awarded the Sustainability Award too, which is great recognition there. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the sort of things that you, Johnsons Velgen are doing for continued growth?
Yeah. I think firstly, I said at the first question, you'd also hear me talking about reflection again. You know, we've been on this journey of brand evolution and brand development probably for maybe 6 or 7 years now from when the new chief executive came in. What we now need to do is take stock of where we are and actually ask ourselves, you know, on the journey we're on, is it still the same path that we wish to take? Now, as a business, we've been evolving our collection, and we've been talking about, you know, are we a category business, or are we a brand business, and are we a wardrobing, are we a lifestyle business? And we are a very strong category business. You will walk into a number of department stores and you can buy Johnsons Velgen scarves within a category, you can buy knitwear within a category. However, if you come into our stores, we try and come across as a lifestyle brand. Now, the challenge with a lifestyle brand, and, you know, listen to what Kate is saying when you talk about, and also what Andrew's talking about when you're talking about the DNA and what you stand for. You know, we are very much made in Scotland, made in Britain, and 100% of everything you walk into New Bond Street and buy is made by us. Now, that comes with limitations if you do want to get into a lifestyle brand, because all of a sudden you're starting to look at who's your partner. Where is that partner based? What is the DNA of the partner? Do they have the same values that you stand for as a business? So that's a bit of a complication if we've got some of our leadership believing that's how we grow this business, and maybe other parts nervous about that journey. So we have to do a lot of reflection on ourselves and actually ask, where are we now? How's the journey went? And where do we see ourselves going? And we're going through that at the moment. We're looking at some partners within that kind of reflection space who will facilitate that conversation among the seniors in the business and within some of the leaders in the business, and do a good point of reflection, and then reflect on what is the next 5 years for the journey, as well as the challenges post-pandemic. Moving on to sustainability, which I think is a key word, and I think Andrew is bang on, it certainly is a very important aspect that I think is here for a very long time, rightly so, because of the challenges we've got within the sustainability market. We too are on that sustainability journey. And what does sustainability mean for us? What does carbon footprint mean for us? And how do we educate consumers? And although, and Kate's absolutely right, when you bring raw fibre into the country, that may come with a higher carbon footprint than maybe sourcing very local. I think there's a bigger dialogue to be had to understand and educate consumers. And government are very vocal on that, you know, government policy and business leaders will drive the change we need on sustainability to drive to a carbon zero or carbon negative global kind of society, I suppose. However, for me, it's also that third element, which is the consumer education. And I may be wearing a jumper that's Johnsons Velgen, and if you look at the branding on this jumper, it's 12 years old. Now, the beauty is this may have been somewhat more expensive at versus a kind of entry or a for the premium level, but it's the lifetime value of that product after. And it's also being conscious that some of the lowest carbon footprint, and you've got to ask the question, what action creates a reaction? Some of the lowest carbon footprint is man-made fibre. Now, it's great that it's got a low carbon footprint. If the conversation stops at carbon footprinting, and it's with man-made fibre that has got plastic in it, every time you wash that man-made fibre, you put plastic into the ocean. So you ask yourself about 100% kind of cashmere product that can be put in the ground at its death, and it will quite happily just work back into the ground, and that death might be 12, 13, 14 years, or reusable, or you look at the life cycle after it, versus that. So the conversation for sustainability has to then move to further than just carbon footprint into what is the value after, what is the carbon value after that lifetime value. So we're doing a lot of work in that space. And I think given the Queen's Award for Sustainability and some of the projects that I know we're working on that we'll announce at the right time, working with some of our luxury partners as well, who are very vocal in this space, rightly so, and very active in this space. So I think that'll structure a lot of what we do in the future, along with the reflection of the brand journey.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, George. Let's see where we, okay, so Nicole, sustainability of small stores as well, and small and writers and book is a big part, I'm sure, of the drive behind Bookshop, and why you probably set that up. Can you tell us a little bit about how that has impacted on book selling so far, and what that looks like for the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think there are two things that technology have done to the book industry, but I think to a lot of industries actually, is it is really created, to build on the last conversation, really created a focus on price, right? So people have assumed that all that customers want is the fastest and cheapest. And everybody's played a role in this, but Amazon has done an extraordinary thing by really squeezing the supply side in order to get a good price to consumers. And so one of the things that we've been able to prove with bookshop.org, and I think this is true, you would see this at Etsy, and I think, you know, to build on some of the things George was saying as well, is I think as an industry or industries, we've vastly underestimated where customers are actually at. And that at bookshop.org, what we've seen is that people are willing to pay a little bit more in the knowledge that they are doing something that feels better and is better. So, you know, our prices are on average 7% off the RRP. That means that you will never come close on like the latest hardback celebrity cookbook. To the price that you could get it for on Amazon. And yet people are buying those books from us in the knowledge that it supports their high streets and their local independent bookshops, that has ramifications for the publishing industry and the types of authors that are discovered, and that it also has an important bearing on sustainability. So we don't control as much of the supply chain of books, but the thing that we did already, even though we're not even a year old, is we've committed to carbon offsets for our deliveries. It's sort of the least we could do, is that you buy from us knowing that we have bought the offset, so getting the book from the warehouse to your house is carbon neutral. So I think that's one big thing where technology has made us think, oh, it's all about price and cheap and fast, but we've underestimated customers on that, and they have moved on and realized the importance of other factors in their consideration. And then the other piece that I think is again, really alive in the book industry, but I think is true, I've seen it at Etsy as well, is the internet and algorithms in particular, the way that they're often set up is converge to a hits business. Right. So like one product does incredibly well. It's on a rocket ship. It's, you know, incredibly popular. And then it's really hard for lots of other products to break through. In the book business, you know, you're either on Amazon's top 100 or you're not. There's like a big cliff after that. And, you know, what was beautiful about working at Etsy is because things were being handmade, there wasn't the capacity for there to be a hits business. There were only so many of a certain thing that you could sell. And you know, I think for loads of reasons in the book industry and with makers, it's really important for that diversity to be there. And so with bookshop.org, we've created an experience where discovery is not just based on an algorithm. It's not just based on a bestseller list. It's not just based on search. So, you know, you don't have to come to our site knowing already what you want to buy. It is based on human recommendations in lists from bookshops, from bookstagrammers, from me, you, media companies, you name it. Anybody can come on and create a list. And that means that, yes, we are using technology to help you find a book, but there's a lot of human intervention into that. And that gives these non-hit books an opportunity really to be discovered. So in other words, the result of that is that our top selling books that list doesn't look very much like the Sunday Times bestseller list as a result. And we feel really proud of that. And we think there's more we can do there, but to sort of crack open that hits business and make it more that readers can connect with the book that's truly good for them and not just the thing that everybody else is reading. I think that is really important and something that technology can be used to do across the board.
Excellent. Yeah, certainly that connection and the human contact is going to be so much more important as well going forward. Kate, just coming towards the end of our question. So what advice would you give to retailers who have traditionally bought overseas to encourage them now to source from the UK?
Oh, it's so complex, Joan. I mean, obviously my background is from retail. It's very hard for big retailers to switch to making in the UK. The number one reason is because the businesses are, because they're so complex, they work out prices just based on what the intake cost price is. And when you're making something in the UK versus overseas, you're not comparing eggs to eggs. That's the problem. So that's part of the reason I got so frustrated with working as a buyer. Debenhams was my last job, because a supplier who was reasonably local for swimwear in Portugal, who might have a fantastic sell-through on their products, the margin was nowhere near as great as the swimwear we bought from China. But the sell-through on the stuff we bought from China was much, much lower, because the lead times were so long. So it wasn't quite so in tune with what the customer needed. So I think this is where we're seeing businesses, particularly the online retailers like the Boohoo's and ASOS, who are realizing it's not about the intake margin, but actually it's about the overall profit on those products. So those products that are made in the UK, where you've got 100% sell-through because you've bought them only sort of a week before, you've made them a week before you actually delivered them to the customer, versus those products that you maybe ordered 3 months, 6 months ago from China, which by the time, I mean, I'm talking about fashion products here in particular, by the time they've reached the warehouses, well, the colour's wrong, or the style's wrong, or we haven't got any sun, so no one wants to buy swimwear. So you've put your money in the wrong thing and you're having to mark it all down. So it's that mindset, I think, from the big retailers about the profitability of each individual product, which is really difficult for them to work out. I mean, I know from speaking to people at ASOS that are trying to work through these numbers, it's very difficult to backtrack on working that out. Whereas a disruptor to the industry like Boohoo has right from the start said, okay, we're going to source nearly everything locally. Our intake margins are going to be a lot lower, but we know that we can sell most of it because we know it's what the customer wants. And this is where the smaller brands are able to be much more nimble. So it's why we're seeing a lot more of the smaller brands making in the UK, because they have less products to deal with. They're much closer to listening to what the customer actually wants. And then they can hop along to the local factory and order just like 50 or 100. Whereas the big retailers in those days of buying thousands. And when I was at M&S, like 20 odd years ago, some styles we were buying it was all in dozens, like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 dozen of one style. I mean, huge. But those days are gone. So retailers really do need to change their mindset on pricing and total pricing and profit, I think, rather than just looking at the cost price, because of course it's always going to cost more to make in the UK. But if it wasn't possible, then there wouldn't be lots of companies very successfully doing it.
Great, thank you. And certainly the impact of fast fashion, where the consumer wants a lot of, we need to educate, and we've talked about educating the consumer too, because ultimately that's what it comes down to appreciate and buy less, buy better and buy less. Certainly that's always been my motto.
I was involved at M&S as a consultant working on their Best of British collection they did about 8 years ago. And what amazes me is they never made it that easy to find online to really shout about the fact that it was made in the UK. They called it Best of British, but it wasn't done with 100% conviction, and therefore it didn't work. And I think part of the reason that retailers don't shout really loudly about the tiny percentage of their product that is made in the UK is because it then advertises the fact that the other 97% isn't. And then the consumer starts to question, okay, well, if that's made in the UK, oh gosh, that's made in China, I'm not going to buy that. And so it's a really complex problem.
Well, we certainly do need the consumers questioning more, because, and obviously now with more online shopping, that's very obvious within the details that are there. So coming towards the end, Andrew, this is the last question. Could we ask you, what are your 4 predictions for retail over the next 5 years?
I think you said 4, I might slip in a 5th. But number 1, I think there's going to be a greater focus on UK products. Why? Because there wants to be differentiation. And I think there will be a lot of appetite as long as UK suppliers sharpen their deliveries. And I agree with Kate about the pricing. You know, it's in the final analysis, what's going to be the sell-through and how much margin you're going to make. Forget about what the entry price point, cost price is. It's what's the sell-through, and I think that's a big opportunity for UK. Secondly, tech will certainly aid multi-channel retail customers. You know, if I look at such things as predictive technology, huge opportunity, and we know that that's one of the benefits that Amazon has on their predictive selling. You know, go on to buy a shirt and they'll sell a t-shirt. 25% of customers will buy a t-shirt if it's recommended. More value retail. We're going to see increase in good and best. I think the mushy middle is going to be more difficult. Sustainability. Who's made it? Where's it made? Is it compliant? Is it sustainable fabrics? Have we reused? You know, a lot of customers are focusing on that today. And those retailers who have got a very strong sustainability program will win. And my last comment is about, which I often get asked, what's the future of bricks and mortar? Yes, of course, there is a future for bricks and mortar, and especially in trophy businesses. The Harrods, the Selfridges, the Lane Crawfords, the Bon Marché in Paris, all exceptional stores. And they show an experience for the customer. So those are my thoughts for the future. A rosy future for the retail business as long as you're relevant.
Keeping relevant, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. That's the end of the questions that I had planned with you. We've got a couple quickly that have come in. I'm afraid we don't have an awful lot of time left. So first one from Ruth is, how much of our problems with physical retail is down to the overpriced property market and the fact that our taxation systems favour big business? Does anyone want to take a...
I think there's a good answer on the rent one. I'll let somebody else take the taxation one, Joan. I think when it comes to property, it's a very good point. I mean, I don't mind sharing that we were on New Bond Street had rent negotiations that we tried to encourage pre-pandemic, which was probably 6 months early. And we were trying to encourage it 6 months early because we knew 6 months later, forecasting the model, that it was significant growth on the rent, the probability. Our rent would probably have changed our business model in New Bond Street had it been risen at that point to where the market was taking it. Post-pandemic, we did renegotiate that rent and it stayed flat, almost flat. So it just shows you how things have changed and actually how rent would have dictated our business model 18 months ago. I think if you then look at New York and what happened in New York probably 3-4 years ago, and actually the tenant became the winner again, and the landlord started to say, okay, I'm willing to negotiate, because the landlord, and when you've got deals that say it's an upward only rent, you know, that's what no matter what the market's doing, it's upward only rent. So New York went through that phenomenal change that I think London was going to go through pre-pandemic. And you've now got a lot of space in New York. They're getting a lot of good deals in New York. You're getting a lot of pop-ups so that people can try. So I think there is a change coming. To answer that question, I think there was pre-pandemic, London was at that point where I think the dictatorship or the kind of forecasting of where the rent was going to drive a different model on the high street of retailers and a different mix, and some of the lesser margin business would have struggled. However, I think now we'll see a change in that market again, and I think we'll see a change in where people are shopping and more out away from city centres. You'll see a lot more pop-ups, a lot more trials, but yeah, I hope that answers it. But it's certainly, there's a change in landscape at the moment, probably for the better for the tenant at the moment.
Certainly, none of us are here representing the government, but the government obviously need to address the issues now. The high street has been decimated. Look at the number of shop closures. Something needs to happen to support small businesses to be able to grow after the impact of the pandemic. One last question. Does the panel have advice for projecting a strong and consistent brand when moving into wholesale, bricks and mortar and online? Is it all about finding the best wholesale partners just to stop your brand getting lost?
But forgive me, I think Andrew answered that. Please carry on, Andrew. I think you've answered that in a very strong way with the partners.
I think that there's no question that for wholesale brands, for wholesalers to be successful, they have to have a minimum credible offering in any retail operation that they're in. You can't, the days of putting a bit of this and a bit of that into stores is gone. You stand for something, excuse me, or you stand for nothing. And very important to refocus for any wholesale suppliers to focus on who they want to do business with, and a bit of this and a bit of that doesn't work anymore.
Great, thank you. Well, we've got 5 minutes left. I don't know if anybody who's watching wants to drop in another question, or if any of the panelists would like to comment on what's been said today. Okay, good. Well, I would like, on behalf of XpoNorth, to say a really big thank you to you all. It's been a fascinating conversation. It's great to get your insight. Your experience is fantastic. This will obviously be available to playback for those that weren't able to see it. But I'd like to thank you on behalf of XpoNorth for helping us out today and talking about the future of retail.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Off to buy Andrew's book now.
Take care.
From bookshop.org. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Goodbye.